radical!
Hello guys, it's Alan the Collector, and for this review we're taking a look at 3 different Gridiron Studios figures. The Green Battle Ready Mech Rider, the MPAC Fatboy Drone, and the Jump Station Vehicle Set. Alright guys, we're back at it again with some more Gridiron goodness, and this time it comes in green. That's right, these are the latest additions to their Battle Ready series, designed to give some ground support for our green shirts. And in true Gridiron fashion, this is how they look fully assembled, but this is how they're going to look when you first get them out of packaging. And just like last time, we're going to start with a familiar Battle Ready Rider Mech in the middle, so how about we make a little room and quickly go over the accessories. Alright, and just like our Navy Battle Ready Rider Mech, we have a pair of missile launchers, ammo cans, smoke launchers, flamethrowers, a ledge, a mounted machine gun with shield, hoses, an antenna, and what looks to me like the barrel of a Mark 19 grenade machine gun. Damn! Now getting back to our green Battle Ready Rider Mech, if you've been watching my reviews, then this should be a pretty familiar piece by now. It's the same exact sculpt as we got with our Navy Battle Ready Rider Mech. The biggest difference here is that it's 3D printed out of a green resin.
A lot of the green.
I'm really digging the accents of black and yellow that we get on some of the lower portions of the Rider Mech's legs. We get more of that black on the pistons along with the gray resin that we also get on the knees with these vents, these joints that can't move, and on these bar pieces on the feet. The feet and hips are on ball joints. They'll move pretty well, but again, there's not going to be any joints near the knees, which is going to be a bummer for some people. I've gotten used to it by now, but just in case this is your first time watching one of my reviews, don't expect that to move at all. Of course, we got riveting and vent detail all throughout to make this look like a real machine, and I'm digging the extra detail that we get on the top portion as well. We get more of that orangish yellow color within the sensors here on the front, along with the lens that's been 3D printed in black. A gray grill bar up front with some grab bars on the top, and I love the look of this machine detail that we're getting on either side, where the weapons will mount to the arms. I do wish this midsection was 3D printed out of a black color, just because I think it would have provided a nice contrast with the rest of the Rider Mech, but having the majority of this machine printed in green gives it a real government-issued feel. Moving on to the back, we get a data panel just like we got before. It's 3D printed in gray, and the details are really nice on it. We also get a black screen, and then some more gray grab bar towards the back. And now that we've got that out of the way, let's quickly start attaching some of those weapons. Starting with these ammo cans, they have a deep olive green color, and the details on them are also pretty nice. But again, I like to think of these more as batteries. They'll plug into these rectangular gaps right here. Very nice. Next up, we'll bring in the gray hip mount of smoke launchers, which also have a pretty decent sculpt to them. They have hexagonal pegs that will plug into these gaps here on the side. Easy enough. We have a pair of flamethrowers with some pretty sharp details that have been 3D printed into them. I love the porting that we're getting on the sides and the look of the hose as it leads up to the lighter up front. We have 2 gaps on the top, which will plug into the underside of the top of the mech right here. We have these black rubber hoses that are hollow and have a pretty decent flex to them. They'll plug right into the back where the flamethrowers are located in this hole right here, and then the other end will connect to this hole on the fuel tank. There we go. We do have these missile launchers, just like the Navy one had. Again, the biggest difference here is that it's 3D printed out of a green resin, but I'm really digging how the gray and the orangish yellow really pops on the front of it. It has some really sharp details that have been 3D printed on the sides, and just like our flamethrower, it has 2 pegs on the top that will plug into these mounts on the side. I like it. I like it a lot. Just like our Navy Mech Rider, this one also comes included with an antenna. It's a pretty simple sculpt, but it gets a bit more detailed as we get towards the base. It has 2 different antennas, and unfortunately for me, the longer one came a little bent. It'll connect using these 2 tabs right into the back of the Mech Rider right here. Line it up. There we go. Next up, we have a mounted machine gun, and if you're familiar with Gridiron Studios, then you'll know that their weapon sculpts are some of the best in the business. We get a logo printed on the side of the gun right here, and a removable box magazine with some ammo painted in gold. We also get a couple of handles for a pilot to grip. I'm also happy to report that the sculpt on this machine gun is also different than the heavy machine gun that came with our Navy Mech Rider. This one's a bit thicker and a little bit shorter as well. The connection to the arm is a bit different too. This one's able to hold its position just a little bit easier, but the one that we have with our new Mech Rider is a lot looser. It's also a bit wobbly where it connects. It's definitely not a deal breaker for me, but it's something to watch out for in case you ordered it. Fortunately, the shape of this machine gun will work a whole lot better with the included gun shield. This is the same gun shield that comes included with most Gridiron products, right down to the riveting detail that we get on the surface, as a rectangular tab on the back, which will fit into this rectangular gap right here at the base of the mount. There's a long peg on the base which will plug into the top of our mech. There's almost no resistance with how it pegs in, so it will move very freely. So that means when this is paired up with the Pilot, you'll be able to pose it just a little bit easier. And speaking of which, we will need a ledge for that. It's the same exact sculpt as we got last time, with the details on the surface as sharp as ever. And if you want to plug it in, we just got to line up this peg right here to this peg hole on the bottom. And as for our final weapon to attach to the center, we have this Mark 19 grenade machine gun, or at least that's what I think it's supposed to be. It's hard to tell when we only get a barrel. It has a 4-prong connection just like before, and it'll plug in right here in the center. Very cool. He's big, he's green, he's mean.
He's a weapon. A big gun that walks.
Well, he's not wrong. Now that we have all the accessories attached, we're gonna need a pilot to take this thing for a spin. And I think Rock and Roll is just the man for the job. All right, Rock and Roll, let's show our viewers what this thing can do. As you can tell, it's not the most articulated thing in the world. However, I think there's just enough here to get them in some pretty cool poses, and if you like stop motion, it's pretty good for that as well. So yeah, even though this basically amounts to a palette swap, I'm still really digging the green on this Battle Ready Rider mech. And I think it'll pose well with the blue Battle Ready Rider mech Gridiron already released. And now that I have these two bots paired up together, you know what I'm thinking.
Let them fight.
Finish him.
Most impressive.
Radical.
Rock and Roll took care of business, but we have just one problem. This mech took quite a beating in that battle. See what I mean? If only we had some spare parts to replace it. That'll work. As you can see, this is the top part of that blue mech that we had. And as you might expect, it is compatible with our green one right here. All we have to do is remove the hoses. We'll also get rid of Rock and Roll for good measure. And then you'll just lift up on this front section. And now, let's put this black piece back on. All we have to do is line up the tabs to these grooves right here in the front. And I have to admit, it doesn't look half bad. This black piece does a really great job of breaking up the color on this mech. Uh-oh. But who are we kidding? The damage is just too extensive on this thing. But fortunately, we do have some more ground support. So it's time to bring in the big guns with our Fat Boy drone. And he comes with some cool stuff too. We get a pair of 50 caliber machine guns, a pair of smaller machine guns, a Mark 19 grenade machine gun barrel, a pair of missile launchers, and the dual UAG weapon system. So as you can see, aside from that midsection that I switched out, the Fat Boy drone is essentially the same machine as their Battle Ready Mech Rider. The biggest difference is that the lower half has real working treads. And even though I've already attached a lot of the same weapons like the machine gun grenade launcher and the missile launcher that come with our Battle Ready mech, they don't call this thing the Fat Boy for nothing, and true to its namesake, he's carrying some seriously heavy weapons. Like this pair of machine guns, and I'm really digging the sculpt that we're getting on them. As you might expect, it has the typical porting that Gridiron Studios usually puts on their firearms, but I also like the addition of this barrel shroud, just like the sculpt on our flamethrowers. It's essentially a covering that surrounds the barrel of a firearm to protect people from the intense heat weapons like this can produce. And it'll fit on in the same way our flamethrowers did, using these peg holes on the underside of our Fat Boy. These machine guns are nice, but I think we can do better.
Set up to 50!
My thoughts exactly. I'm really digging the sculpt that we get on this pair of 50 caliber machine guns, right down to the porting, the mechanical bits, and then we even get a Gridiron Studios logo here on the bottom. We also get a peg hole that should accommodate some blast effects in your collection, and if you think this thing looks nice now, just wait till you see it attached to our Fat Boy. And as you can see, it has these additional pegs on these mounts that will accommodate the peg hole that we get on the bottom of our 50 caliber machine gun. But if you get the Fat Boy in hand, there is one thing you need to keep in mind. Mine had an extra piece of 3D printed material that was blocking this peg in particular. Fortunately, Mark from Gridiron Studios posted a quick fix on their Instagram page.
If you take a pair of needle nose pliers and you just get inside there, you can pinch that one support off.
It's an easy enough issue to resolve, but hopefully it's only a problem with their early batches. But once you do have it removed, you can easily attach your 50 cal. Now you know.
And knowing is half the battle.
Gridiron! And there we have it. Our Fat Boy drone is complete. What do we think?
So fat.
I'll say, it definitely looks like it's ready for battle. This is the standard look you're gonna get when you order from Gridiron Studios. However, I still don't think this is enough to take on Cobra.
Gonna need some major firepower.
But don't worry, we have just a tool for the job. Allow me to present to you the GAU weapon system. This by far is my favorite piece that came with the Fat Boy, and you can tell there was a lot of tender love and care that was put into it. I'm really digging the twin rotating barrels that we get that have been 3D printed out of a black resin, while the main body was 3D printed out of a darker military green. And there's there's no shortage of detail either. We get some texture on the grips, these cables connected to the 4 motors necessary to power the Gatling guns, and it has a camera lens likely to automatically lock on enemies in front of it. Although mine wasn't painted black for some reason. Not the worst thing in the world though, considering that this thing was free. If you took advantage of the early bird special when this fat boy was first announced, Gridiron Studios included one of these with every order. So I'm not too bummed out about the lack of paint for that reason.
Well, maybe just a little bit.
And just like our gun shield, it has a peg that'll attach right to the top of our fat boy. The connection is fine. Gravity's doing most of the work here. However, if I'm being completely honest, I think it could stand to be just a little bit tighter. Like our gun shield, it's a bit on the loose side. However, it doesn't mean you won't have a problem posing it around. And with this weapon system attached, even though this drone can't operate by itself, we can probably bring in one of our Joes to help steer it. I personally think Roadblock is up to the task. Alright Roadblock, I think you're ready. Let's make some room and take this thing out for a spin. Now remember, take it easy. It's not a classified weapon you're handling. It's got some real power, so... Oh, look at that. It looks like Roadblock dropped his data pad. And it looks like there's an incoming message. Let's take a look. Huh, it's Wild Bill. It looks like he's discovered an enemy stronghold, but he needs to make an emergency landing with the Dragonfly for refueling. It also says he has a couple of Steel Corps troopers flying by for extra support. Oh, would you look at that? Right on time. Normally I'd be unprepared for a situation like this, but fortunately we have just the machine for the job. I think it's time we brought in our jump station, don't you? So, let's see what it comes with. And our jump station comes with another pair of missile launchers, a jetpack, 2 rocket effects, and a fueling nozzle. Now as you can tell, our jump station is built on that fat boy upper body. So there's really not a lot of new there, especially when it comes to weapons like the missile launchers. But in the front, we do get a smooth black lens in place of a heavy weapon, which kind of makes him look like a droid, and it's for that reason that I'm going to call him MP4C. How do you like that? Oh, I guess he's happy. But the most unique part by far has to be what's sitting on top of the drone, which happens to be this helipad for our 6-inch troopers. It's about 5 inches by 5 inches, so there should be plenty of room for our 6-inch figures. I'm especially digging the segmented yellowish orange circle. The 3D printed texture is coming through, but I think it helps. It gives it a very technical look, almost like it was designed in a way to help increase traction when landing, especially in inclement weather. We have 2 handlebars on the side for our figures to grab onto, and then we also get a step ladder in the back that's been 3D printed out of a gray resin. I love the pattern that we're getting on the steps for the ladder, and we also get a connection point for our fuel nozzle. I'm also digging the drone lower on this set. It has 4 wheels instead of treads, which would make this perfect for the inside of a hangar base. But the tread on these tires also look robust enough to handle even the toughest battlefields. This lower also has a tray where you could probably store some accessories if you wanted. But that's enough going over the details. I think those Steel Corps troopers are getting ready to land. Good work, MP. And good work, Roadblock. Our threat may be out of the way, but unfortunately our Steel Corps trooper isn't looking too hot. Not to mention his jetpack has seen better days. If only we had a solution. What's that, MP? You're saying you know how to fix this? Well, I'm out of ideas, so go for it. Great work, MP. That's exactly what we needed. As you can see, this is a jetpack that Gridiron Studios included with the jump station. We get porting at the top, some piping that's been painted in silver that connects to the 2 main rockets, and then when we get closer to the back, sculpted buttons and joints, raised paneling and riveting, and all sorts of ventilation and gaps to really help sell the look. But my favorite part by far has to be the inclusion of these 5 rockets. We have 2 main ones that mirror our G.I. Joe classified version, but the opening on them is a lot larger. We have another slightly smaller one in the middle, and then on top of that, we have 2 smaller rockets with joints sculpted in them. They can't move, but it does give the impression that this has a lot more maneuverability than our G.I. Joe classified jetpack had. We also get some shoulder mounted thrusters on top. It can't move at all, but the sculpt gives the impression that these would be able to swivel, indicating that this would change position on the drop of a dime. I love the addition of the sculpted metal frame to help support the back. It has nice porting detail throughout, and it wouldn't be a Gridiron Studios product if they didn't manage to squeeze their logo in. I mean, just look at how it compares to our G.I. Joe classified version. You can obviously tell what Gridiron Studios was inspired by, and this is not a bad sculpt by any stretch of the imagination. But when you compare the two, the difference is night and day. But you're probably wondering how this jetpack is supposed to attach. When we go to the back, the G.I. Joe classified version had a giant peg that allows it to plug onto the backs of most 6-inch figures. But I think Gridiron Studios came up with an even better solution in this shoulder harness. It's been 3D printed out of a black resin as opposed to the military green of our jetpack, but the details came out pretty sharp on this piece as well. We have some sculpted D-clips in the front, some sculpted carabiners on the bottom, some padding at the top, and then we also have sculpted straps in the back, in addition to the GS initials down the bottom of this black clip. And this is going to be incredibly important because that's how we're going to attach it to our jetpack. You just got to line it up with the gap that we're getting on the back here. And then once you do, it's not going anywhere. And the thing that I appreciate the most about this is that this strap is actually a one-size-fits-most kind of deal. But in this case, we're going to bring in the Grunt Trooper from the G.I. Joe classified line. So without further ado, let's suit him up. And there we have it, our jetpack is attached, and even though this Grunt Trooper does come with the vest, you can see that this shoulder harness had no problem attaching to him, and he looked pretty nice with it as well. But if we want to make him look even better, Gridiron Studios did provide us with some rocket effects that we can plug into the jetpack. They look pretty nice. There's a decent gradient between a darker and lighter color orange, and they have rather sizable pegs so that it'll fit into these rockets very easily. I must say, I'm digging the results. And once they're in there, they're not going anywhere. They're pretty secure. It really does a lot to enhance the look, and I'm sure it's also going to enhance your displays or photography if you're into posing your action figures. But on my channel, we like to do things a little bit differently. So, without further ado, let's make our faceless trooper airborne. 10 out of 10 execution if you ask me. But all that flying means you'll eventually need a refuel. Unfortunately, we have this. This is the fueling nozzle that comes with the jump station. It has sculpted bolts and a trigger and the Gridiron Studios initials on top. And the two pegs right here will either help it connect to the ladder or the back of the jetpack. A neat little feature if you ask me, and you'll probably notice that the hose attaches all the way back to our jump station. Or you can plug it into the 4 points on the corner of the bottom half. And what I like about it is that it can get in there pretty deep.
That's what she said?
And when the pieces are separated in this way, you can have them interacting with your larger vehicles, including the Dragonfly. So now, rather than using the step on the Dragonfly, you can have your figures more easily accessed it using this helipad. Or you can perhaps pretend as though the bottom half stores all the fuel and you can refuel your Dragonfly. Refueling. And even though there's not really a place to plug this in on the Dragonfly, you can at least use your imagination. And while our trooper's doing that, you can actually take this jetpack and you can wedge it into the top of the ladder as we saw earlier. So you can store it when you're not using it. It looks like Wild Bill's ready to bust that enemy stronghold, but before we join him, I want to show off one more thing. Now, one of my favorite aspects about Gridiron Studios figures is just how compatible they are with each other. So if, for example, you wanted to take your battle-ready rider mech and give them a few more weapons, you can easily turn your rider mech into the ultimate walking war machine and give your Fat Boy drone some literal firepower. Or if you want to have a lot more fun, you can bring in some bigger vehicles, like the heavy weapons trailer or the first of the vamp upgrades in the ground pounder, which I really need to finish because look at that, Jesus really needs to take the wheel. I'm talking all 4 of them. I think I'm overdue for an upgrade, but we can gripe about that another time. I really want to see how well this Fat Boy upper looks on top. Honestly, it does look pretty nice on the roof, but because of that grill bar, it doesn't really swivel well. But it's a good thing that we have this adapter piece that will allow this to attach and give it a little bit more elevation. And honestly, that adapter makes a world of a difference because not only can this Fat Boy swivel freely now, but it also makes the vamp upgrade look a whole lot better.
I agree.
And while it can't fit, you could spin this sucker around, lower the tailgate, and pretend as though it just deployed the jump station. I'm sure with a little bit of toy photography, you could make that look extra special. But putting all that aside, we can also do some pretty special stuff with our heavy weapons trailer and our battle-ready rider mech. I've been meaning to see just how cool those surface-to-air missiles would look with a pair of legs. So how about we swap them out? And honestly, there's just something really special about this setup. Our heavy weapons trailer has some extra firepower, and our missile system looks extra creepy with those legs. And honestly, we could be here all day trying out new combinations, and Wild Bill's gonna need some help. So on that note, I think it's time for a size comparison. Everything you see here is in the 6-inch scale. The drones stand just over 4 inches tall with their attachments, and the rider mech is about 8 inches tall with the gun shield, which means they're going to scale perfectly with 6-inch lines like the Power Rangers Lightning Collection SPD 8 Squad Rangers as well as the Shadow Ranger. They're going to look really good standing alongside various Marvel Legends Avengers figures, and they'll work perfectly with your green shirt army builders as well as Sergeant Slaughter and General Hawk in the G.I. Joe Classified line. Here's how they look pitted up against some larger classified vehicles like the Cobra Stinger, HasLab His Tank, and Cobra HMS. I think you could fudge them in with some 7-inch McFarlane figures like their 7-inch DC Multiverse Crime Syndicate figures. And though it's a bit silly, they're fun to pair alongside the NECA cartoon TMNT figures. I think they'll work great with various Legion builders of the Four Horsemen's Cosmic Legions line, and they're gonna have their hands full taking on 3 different Robo-Skulls by Skeletron. Of course, they're gonna look great with the Navy Battle Ready series from Gridiron, as well as the upgraded Cobra Flight Pod Coil Snake Armor sets. And you'll have quite the ground support with these other green machines from Gridiron. And finally, here's how they look under black light. And it's about what you'd expect, no effect. So as for my final thoughts, as you might have guessed, I'm a big fan of these mean green machines. Even though I already have a Navy Battle Ready Mech Rider, the green 3D printing just looks so good on this design. And the slight variation of weapons are subtle, but nice touches to help differentiate it from the previous release. The Fat Boy was my most anticipated drone in the series, and its stocky design and assortment of weapons definitely doesn't disappoint. Plus the early bird bonus with the dual UAG weapon system is just a cherry on top. But surprisingly, the winner of this series, at least for me, has to be the Jump Station. It's not nearly as flashy as the other two, but I love how well it complements my existing G.I. Joe Classified collection, and it pairs up well with the Dragonfly as a support vehicle. And I might be the only one who thinks this, but that eyepiece gives it so much personality. Not to mention the modularity between these figures as well as other Gridiron products help to add a lot of play value as well. Issues like looseness of certain weapons, lack of articulation, and imperfections in their printing process keep it from being perfect. But for most of you, this is all going to come down to price. I cannot stress enough that these things aren't cheap. We're talking about $80 for the drones and $90 for the Mech Rider. Not an easy pill to swallow, even when considering that Gridiron producing everything in the US is a large part of what makes them so expensive. So while I think anyone would be happy to have these on their shelves, if you've never bought from Gridiron, you're really going to need to consider all the factors before jumping in blindly. And that's how I think my review might help you. Hopefully I gave you a clear understanding of what to expect and a few ideas on how to really enjoy these figures. And if you're still not swayed, at the very least I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed putting it together. These may not be for everyone, but I have a feeling they're going to be for a lot of you. And if nothing else, they'll do a great job in adding some ground support to your existing collections. But that'll do it for this review. Thank you so much for your time, and don't forget to like, comment, or share my video if you found it entertaining or think it might be helpful to someone else. Your support is always appreciated. Be sure to stick around for a gallery at the end. And as always, collect responsibly.